Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economics. How are you all doing? I hope you all are doing good. Well, today I brought for you all October November 2025 0455 variant 22 2281 variant 22. We'll be doing section A of paper 2 today. Let's see what this paper has brought for us today. As usual, we'll be going by the source material first. We'll be reading the source material first. This time they have given us a fact file for Japan. They've given us a table that displays labor shortages. Now, what are they saying? They talked about the population, which hovered around 125 million. They've given us statistics for 2022. Population was 125 million. Total labor force, including foreign workers, was around 70 million. That means out of the working population, the working population was 70 million, and of this 70 million, foreign workers were also included. So this means domestic workers and foreign workers added together was equal to 70 million. Foreign workers was 1.75 million in isolation. Inflation hovered around 2.5%, and 29% of the income was saved by the Japanese. That means they saved almost 30% of their income, which means that they must be spending 70%, right? So 30% of their income was saved. So let's say approximately 70% was spent. Now they say Japan has a high average age of population and a varied economic performance. It has a low birth rate, low inflation, good health care, high life expectancy, and low unemployment rate. That means the indicators show that things are pretty good. High average age of population, why the population is not young is because they have got low birth rate. There is a lesser proportion of younger generation. Good healthcare means life expectancy is high. People tend to live longer. Healthier population, right? More productive. Low inflation rate means that purchasing power is high. Low unemployment rate means that most of the population is employed, so this means the government does not have to spend much on the provision of unemployment benefits. That means standard of living is comparatively or relatively high. Fewer Japanese people enter the labor force each year, but there's an issue. Less of Japanese people are entering the labor force. It is predicted that total Japan's labor force will fall by 10 million by 2040. So this means by the end of 2040, its labor population is going to fall by 10 million. That means by the end of 2040, maybe if the figures remain the same, it's going to be somewhere around 60 million. Many young Japanese people immigrate to Australia, Canada, and the US in search of higher wages. However, Japan now experiences net immigration, although foreign workers are currently only a small proportion of Japan's labor force. Now, they've given us two contradicting statements at the same time. First, they are saying that more and more Japanese tend to leave Japan for these countries. Why? Because they want to earn higher wages. So this means that Australia, Canada, and US pays Japanese workers relatively higher for the same skill set that maybe Japan was paying, right? But they say that it's not that only Japanese are leaving, it's also that people are coming to Japan as well, right? However, the proportion is less. Further, they say to achieve an annual economic growth rate of 1.2%, now the government aims to achieve an economic growth rate of 1.2% each year. it has estimated that the number of foreign workers would have to increase to 7 million by 2040. So, in order to achieve this target, Japan has to increase foreign workers to 7 million. How much it is at the moment? 1.75. So, this has to increase to 7 million. Some foreign workers are discouraged from working in Japan. Now, why are foreign workers not encouraged or not motivated to enter Japan? What's the issue? What are the hurdles? Due to the requirement to pass a Japanese language test, only the most skilled are allowed to stay for more than 5 years and to bring their families with them. So now we've highlighted the issue. Why are foreign workers reluctant to stay in Japan or offer Japan? Is because it's difficult to pass the Japanese language test. And even if they make their way, or even if they pass the test, the issue is that only the most skilled workers are allowed to stay for more than 5 years and are allowed to bring their families. So these are the three restrictions which are preventing foreign workers from entering or considering to move to Japan. Now what happens? Many Japanese industries are affected by labor shortages. So now production is being affected by labor shortages and the country's decline in population. So now because the population is aging, the population is not young, and there is lesser amount of people in the working population, so there are labor shortages. And the industry that has been most hit by this issue is the furniture industry, right? It has also influenced the country's air transport industry. So there are two industries which have been greatly struck by a fall in labor is the air travel industry, right? And the furniture. Air travel is the most important mode of transport in Japan for long distance travel and for internal and for foreign travel. Japan's air passenger numbers follow a similar pattern to global air passenger numbers. So now if you talk about how people travel in Japan, so they follow the similar pattern like the world air travel, right? This means if there is a surge in the air travel in the global market, so Japanese would also be traveling more. If there's a fall in the international market, so there would also be lesser traveling or lesser demand for air travels by Japanese. So it's likewise. Now they've given us another table, and what does this table shows? It shows global GDP per head and global air passenger numbers between 2016 and 2022. So now for these years, they've given us two variables. For each year, they are displaying us what had happened to the GDP globally, per head GDP globally, and what had happened to the number of people traveling globally, right? So now if you notice, you just skim through it, notice that each year from 2016 to 2019, the global GDP was rising from 10,217, 10,745, then 11,289, 11,356. So it kept on rising, and so did the number of global air passengers. Now look to your extreme right, 3.8 billion, then the passenger rose to 4.1, then to 4.5, then to 4.5, right? So it kept on increasing till 2019. But then in 2020, the global GDP per head dipped, so did the number of air passengers, right? In 2021, it rose, but the global air passengers still was not increasing. In 2022, the global GDP rose, and so did the number of air passengers. Now we look into the whys later on. Why did it happen? The whys later on. All right. Further, they say demand for goods and services, including air travel, is influenced by how much people save. So now they say that the demand for the goods and services is affected by the propensity to save. Japanese people save a relatively high proportion of their income, which we already figured out it was almost what, 30%, right? This has affected the country's inflation rate, current account balance, and the balance of payment and its economic growth. So, what has savings done is that savings has impacted these four variables: the inflation rate, current account, POP, economic growth. Further, they say Japanese macroeconomic performance is also influenced by the mobility of its labor force. How much flexible is its labor force, both in terms of occupational mobility and geographical mobility? There are several reasons why Japan's labor force mobility may change in the future. Now, they say it is likely that this mobility factor might change in future owing to reasons such as labor force aging, possible changes in education and training, house prices, and the quality and price of transport. So now they say that there might be a possibility that the labor mobility in future for Japan might change due to these variables. What? Prices of housing, quality of housing, education and training available, and the aging of labor force. So these factors are going to affect the mobility of labor force for Japan in future. So far so good? All right. Let's see what are the questions. Question number 1, part A. Calculate foreign workers as a percentage of Japan's labor force in 2022. It's a 1 mark question. We have to calculate how much foreign workers were as a percentage of Japan's labor force. So in the numerator, we'll insert foreign workers. How much were they? 1.75 million, right? And how much was the labor force? 70 million. So that we'll put in the denominator. Now look towards your right where the solution I have written. We have written the solution. So 1.75 comes in the numerator, 70 million comes in the denominator, but because that talks about the entire labor force. And into 100, why? Because we need to calculate the percentage. So the percentage would be 2.5%. If you've not written the percentage, they'll not award you marks, right? So be sure to insert the percentage symbol, right? You've shown this, you got a full 1 mark. Part B. Part B asks us identify 2 reasons why Japan has a high average age of population. You just need to identify. That means just write it down. Just list it down. No need to explain it. What did the case study identify? What were the reasons given in the source material that tells you why do you think Japan has a high average age population? We told you, and we highlighted it as well, that they have a low birth rate. This means a small proportion of young people, and they've got good health care, which means people live longer. They've got high life expectancy. That means more people live beyond 60 years, right? Good health care, high life expectancy, and low birth rates. So write any of these 2 reasons and you'll get straight 2 marks, right? All right. Moving forward. Part C. Part C says explain why some young Japanese people emigrate. Now you're going to tell me why Japanese people are leaving Japan. Now it's a 2 mark question. So what you need to do is you just need to identify one reason and expand on it. Give the logic, give the reasoning, give the required explanation, develop that chain analysis, give that reasoning, and you'll get straight 2 marks, right? So you could say that Japanese people are immigrating or leaving Japan in search for higher wages. Why? Because it will enable them to enjoy a higher standard of living. Higher wages will enable them to earn higher incomes. As a result, their purchasing power will increase. They will be able to spend more on the luxuries of life, or they will be able to have a higher basket for goods and services, or maybe have more access to essentials, right? So they'll be living better off. You've given that straight 2 marks. I hope you've understood. Moving forward, part D. Part D says explain 2 ways why how Japan could attract more foreign workers. Now they are asking you to explain 2 ways in which Japan could be successful in attracting more foreigners, right? They want more foreign workers. Now it's a 4 mark question. How are the marks being awarded? Identification for the first reason and its explanation will yield you 2 marks. Identification for the second reason and expanding on that reason, giving its logic, will yield you the last fourth mark. So, the first way The first way in order for Japan to attract more foreign workers could be remove the requirement to pass the Japanese language test, because that is acting as a hurdle, a barrier for workers, because most of them are unable to pass the test, and even though they might possess the skill set required for the job, but just because they are unable to pass the language test, they are unable to shift or move to Japan, right? So, in this way, more foreign workers would come. Further, what it can do is it can allow workers to get permanent work permit, or it should allow not only the most skilled workers but allow all the workers, those who are less skilled or unskilled, also to bring in their families and live for more than 5 years. Why? Because this will improve the mobility of workers both geographically and occupationally. Further, it will improve their skill set as well. And as a result, Japan would experience an influx of foreign workers, right? So, allowing them to bring in their families would improve the number of foreign workers that Japan might have. So far, so good. You've given this straight 4 marks. Part E. Part E asks us to draw a demand and a supply diagram to show the effect of a decrease in population on the market for furniture. So now remember that because of a fall in the working population, the furniture industry was badly affected. Now, there are 3 ways in which you can graphically represent this. A, you can show a fall in demand by shifting the demand curves towards the right. B, you can show a fall in supply by shifting the supply curve towards the right. Or you could show a fall in demand curve and a fall in supply curve. All 3 ways are correct, are shown possible by the examiner. What I have done is I have shown a fall in demand, right? So now, how are the marks going to be awarded? That I'm going to explain you. Either ways, if you followed these 4 steps, you will be awarded straight 4 marks. That's a 4 mark question. The first mark will be awarded to you if you've displayed the axis, label the axis correctly. The vertical axis has to display price, the horizontal axis has to display the quantity. The second mark will be awarded to you if you've shown the initial demand and the supply curve. The third mark will be awarded to you if you've shown the correct shift of the demand curve towards the left. Plus, the final fourth mark will be awarded to you if you've shown the new equilibrium positions or shown P1, Q1, and shown the initial equilibrium position as PQ, right? This way, the 4 marks will be awarded. Now, notice since there was a fall in the demand for furniture, the entire demand curve will shift towards the left, As a result, now the equilibrium fell from E to E1, so the price fell from P to P1, and as a result, there was also a fall in quantity. That's it. Straight 4 marks will be awarded to you. Part F. Part F asks us to analyze the relationship between GDP per head globally and global air passenger numbers. Now, this is an analyzed question. It's a 5 mark question. For this, we look into this table that they had given us, table 1.1. The first part of the table displays the global GDP per head. The second displays the number of air passenger numbers. Now, if we notice from 2016 to 2019, what had happened was that as the global GDP per head rose, so did the number of air passengers. So, what we can say is that throughout there is a positive relationship between global GDP per head and the number of air passengers. This means that as the global GDP per head rose, so did the number of air passengers. What does this show? This shows that as air travelers experienced a rise in their incomes, more and more workers or people were inclined to travel for work and leisure activities. Why? Because higher incomes meant a higher purchasing power. As a result, they experienced a higher standard of living, making them to travel more for internally maybe for their jobs and for their leisure purposes for vacations, right? Now, what makes you say that? You're going to give the evidence. If you followed these 3 steps, you've got 3 marks already. Further, you are going to give the evidence. And how can you say that? You say that since 2016 to 2019, if you notice that as the global GDP per head rose, so did the number of passengers globally rose. Even in 2020, notice that though the global GDP per head fell, so did the number of air passengers also fell. However, there exists an exception. And what is the exception? That though in 2021 the number of air passengers rose, however, the GDP per head rose, however, the number of air passengers did not rise. However, it further fell. Why? It could be maybe because after COVID 19, less people were traveling, or maybe people were earning lesser incomes, their purchasing power had reduced, or it could also be that the airfares were relatively higher, making less people able to travel, right? You followed this, you've answered this question in this pattern, and you'll be rewarded straight 5 marks. I hope this is clear. Moving forward, discuss question part G. It's a 6 mark question. The question is asking discuss whether or not high savings rate is likely to benefit Japan. Now, we are going to say now, again, if you follow only one side of the answer, you're not going to be getting more than 4 marks. You need to produce a well balanced argument with supporting logical statements. So, if you say that yes, a high savings would benefit Japan, why? Because Japan population is already saving almost 30% of its income. A higher proportion of income being saved is enabling Japan to experience a relatively low inflation. That means that its demand pull inflation is relatively low. Uh, Too much money chasing too few goods, it's in control. This means that since people are saving more, banks have relatively more money in with them that could be given to people for expansion or can be spent for more productive activities or given to producers for expansion. This also means that the government can spend its revenue on achievement of other macroeconomic aims rather than spending on unemployment benefits or giving pensions. So it can achieve its macroeconomic aims. It also means that people are spending less on imports. As a result, current account is going to be in surplus, in a favorable position. Balance of payment is going to be in a positive scenario. As a result, Japanese yuan is going to enjoy a favorable position. It's going to appreciate, and further, it's going to provide financial security and stability to Japan's economy. However, it could be that a high savings rate might not be that beneficial for Japan, because it could also mean that people are spending maybe too low. That means overall aggregate demand could fall, leading towards a recession. That means that might be leading towards cyclical unemployment, that is, demand deficient unemployment. And as a result, producers might shrink their production activities. As a result, they might consider laying off workers, unemployment might rise, economic growth might fall. As a result, people might be lay off, their standard of living might fall, income would fall, scale of production would shrink, standard of living would fall, and would negatively impact the Japanese economy. This could also mean that since people are spending less, as a result, the government would be earning less by way of its indirect taxes. And if there is cyclical unemployment experienced by Japan's economy, this means more laying of workers. So people would be out of jobs. So this means government would also be getting less through direct taxes, because now there would be lesser incomes. So the conclusion could be that yes, though higher savings supports investment and increases stability, yet it can slow down economic activity. So there should be a balanced savings rate, right? All right. Last part, part H, asks us to discuss whether or not labor mobility in Japan is likely to increase in future. Now, what do you think? Is labor mobility going to be on the uprise, or it's going to fall? Now, notice in the very last paragraph, they had shown that labor mobility is going to be affected by its aging labor force, education training, house prices, and the quality and price of air transport. So, I've used these variables only in my answer to answer this question, this discuss question. It's a 6-mark question. Again, you need to produce a well-balanced argument. If I say that yes, in future, Japan's labor mobility is going to increase, we are going to say that since Japan is considering to spend more on its education and providing training to its labor, it's going to improve upon the occupational mobility. So if workers can be retrained, this means they will be learning in new technologies, and it will be relatively easier for them to move into more skilled jobs. It, they will easily adapt, improve their skill set, and higher education would make them more adaptive, receptive to changes in technology, and earn higher wages, thereby improving their occupational mobility. It could also be that improving the quality and price of air transport means that more people would move into Japan to look for jobs and be a part of its labor force. So, geographical mobility would improve, the barriers can be eased off, people would easily travel because travel fares are not a hurdle, they can move to and fro, right? However, it could be that no, in the future, labor mobility might not improve. Why? Because if prices of housing rise, so the geographical mobility might be hampered, it might be an obstruction, it might reduce the geographical mobility of workers. Plus, it could also be that since Japan is experiencing an aging workforce, this means that the workers have an obsolete skill set, they are less tech savvy, they give more preference to job stability, and their willingness to change jobs or careers is less. So they are more prone to stick on to jobs rather than switching between jobs. So this means that they would be occupationally immobile, right? So, whether or not Japan's labor mobility will increase in future highly depends upon its size and age of its labor force and how positively Japan responds to variables such as the provision of education and training and reducing the barriers to improve occupational and geographical mobility for foreign workers, especially. I hope you understood and enjoyed solving this paper with me. Stay tuned, subscribe. I'll be back with more such tutorials for you. Happy learning.